Hi everybody, I'm Ubercoo, and today I'm going to be reviewing A Perfect World. A Perfect World is a personal favorite of mine. It came out when I was about 10 years old. I was a little bit older than the boy Philip in the movie here, who was actually 8 years old in the film. The character, I'm not sure how old the actual kid was. His name is T.J. Lowther, I guess. This movie, it stuck with me. It's something that I took along because when you watch it as a 10-year-old kid, when it first came out, it was something that, due to the nature of the film, it's really ingrained because it's a perspective that you don't always get to see. There's a dichotomy to the main character, Butch, Kevin Costner, that is really well done, I think. There's two stories in the film. There is his story in Philip the Kid, and there's, the police chasing him, right? From these two stories, the story between Kevin Costner and the kid is almost like from the kid's point of view, in that even though you see what Kevin Costner does in the film, you're still enamored by him. You're still you want to root for this guy because he's not that bad. He's, you know what I'm saying? You see it, he's really friendly and charismatic, but yet he takes a lot of it too far. You see him as, weathered by the world, in the world that he grew up in, and I'm going to get to that. So let me start off by saying this review, I'm going to try to keep it trimmed down. I don't want to go too much into it, but I know I will, because it's a good movie. I got notes, pages of these notes here that I was going to go through. Let me start off by talking about the technical, right? Basically, it was directed by Clint Eastwood, which we all know Clint Eastwood, amazing director, actor, all around, just cool. Kevin Costner, who plays Butch Haynes. Now, you find out Butch is actually not his real name; it's actually a nickname. But you find out later in the film. And then you have Laura Dern, who is playing a criminologist associated to Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood's character is, his name is Chief Red Garnet, and her name is Sally Gerber. Now, also you have quite a few cameos in the film. That from people that later had better careers, right? You've got Bradley Whitford from Billy Madison and The West Wing, and all the things that he's done. Bruce McGill, he's got, him as soon as you see him. He's that dude. He's usually got a goatee. He's been in a lot of movies, especially in the '90s. As soon as you see him, that guy. Here, Laura Hart. She was actually in a different movie with Kevin Costner, Tin Cup. She was his ex-wife or ex-girlfriend or something from Tin Cup. I think that movie either came out just before or just after this movie, so they were all close together and stuff. And I'll get to that later in the film, or in the review. Oh, the movie was written by John Lee Hancock, and I've actually appreciated his work because you don't see a lot of it. Not in a bad way. It's just you would go to his IMDb page, there's probably he's written and directed a few movies and stuff like that. He's got it's good quality, right? He knows how to write a story. He's written The Founder, the one with Michael Keaton. And Saving Mr. Banks, I think that was with Tom Hanks playing Disney. Oh, yeah, so the story takes place in Texas, about 1963. As a footnote, to that, The Sandlot is based in 1962. The reason why I bring that up is because this time frame I've noticed as I grew older, a lot of movies were kind of based around that time, and that's really interesting. So if you think about it, me being 10 years old in '93, watching a movie based in 1963, and then another one of my favorite movies, The Sandlot, is based in 1962. Then you have other movies about the same time in the mid '90s, also kind of replaying those early '60s, like Forrest Gump, or I know there's more, but I know, Mr. Holland's Opus is another one. That's also a kind of a time frame movie where it goes from like the '50s to like the '90s, but there's a good chunk in there where it's like the early '60s, and that was like his generation. For me personally, I've always found that time frame between like 1960 and like 1964 to be like this wedge of Americana, if that makes sense. Like, and it doesn't matter where you're from. Like, there's like the music of that time, the automobiles of that time is just like, there's a joke actually both in this movie and in Forrest Gump about Dr. Pepper. And there's a lot of references in this movie. There's a lot of references of the time. Talk about like moon pies, Dr. Pepper, which are amazing, by the way, if you have a chance. Yeah, just like little things like that, right? Of that era. And it's not like forced into the movie like some other modern movies are today, where it's just like, here's '90s land, or Marvel. I'm not going to go into that. What I do want to start off with is the overall statement about this film. To me, what I got from it was the movie was a reflection of like manhood, fathers and sons. A perfect world seems to be what we strive for yet miss, and what could be. A lack of opportunity in life, or in the choices we make, and also a reflection of society in that, with like the justice system and the prison system and stuff, and like this revolving door of just bad experiences, from generation to generation, which then exasperate the next generation. You know what I'm saying? They just continue off because whatever reasons of that time. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's something that this really delves into about, and you find out later in the film through Butch's character, through his past, about how his life turned out, and then like it all comes together. Like this movie is really, really well written. I would definitely recommend go watch the film first, really, before watching any reviews of it. I am going to spoil some. I'm going to try to not to spoil a lot, but I do want you to watch the film ahead of time, because it's just a good, well-written movie. Like there's foreshadowing that gets paid off. I can't think of any real plot holes in the film. Like it just is a nicely well-made movie, which seems to be very more rare these days. You can't find a movie that doesn't really have a plot hole, or just something ridiculous that just like they have to be forced in because the corporate says so. This movie is something else. Different time, by the way, different era, and I'm going to get to that too. Basically, how the movie starts. I want to start off with, it opens up with like Kevin Costner and his partner at the beginning, Terry. I didn't catch his last name. It doesn't say. I can't see his name. So, his partner's named Terry, and Terry is a career criminal who's been obviously in and out, and just a antisocial person, right? Just I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna do what I want. Blah blah blah. Kevin Costner is more controlled. He's a thinker. You know what I'm saying? He's not the the rash type. He knows what he's gonna do, or he's very charismatic. He's they actually talk about it in the film how they had him tested, and there's actually a joke later on in the film with Laura Dern, and she says there's only two. She's one of the two smartest people in the pursuit or in the chase. I don't remember the exact line, but and then Clint Eastwood's like, "Who's the other person?" And then she says Butch, because they had him tested in prison. So I thought that was a great line. Basically putting her up front of the entire group of guys chasing after Butch, right? And then like Butch is the other intelligent one. I thought that was pretty funny. So he's the leader dude, right? And when they escape from prison, they actually meet this other security guard who happens to be there. Like he's like a recurring, I don't know if he's like a delivery guy, but he shows up and the guard knows him, and he just goes in, he does his thing. While he's away, and the car is just sitting there, the two guys, Kevin Costner and Terry, they steal the car, and then in the process, they actually kidnap the dude and use him to escape from the prison, right? Now, the last thing you see with him is that they're pulling away from the prison, and you don't see who actually has the gun in their hand, but somebody's got a gun in their hand pointing at the back of his head. That's the last thing you see. Then cut to Philip in his house. Now, his family comes from a religious family of Jehovah's Witness, and the story starts off in Texas, the day of Halloween. Now, I want to say this. Let me put a side note. I don't consider this to be a Halloween movie, as in Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Because, now, Die Hard is... I would consider Die Hard a Christmas movie because it's involved with the story, okay? This has elements, or it has the backdrop of Halloween, but it's not purely a Halloween movie. You know what I'm saying? If someone asked me if this is a Halloween movie, I would say no. That might even be debatable. Some might even say yes. But to me, personally, I just don't consider it. Because I don't think you should have to. I don't think everything has to be a thing, right? Can't we just enjoy a movie? Things like that. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so he is Philip. Now, his name is L.W. Lothar. And I looked to see if he had any other acting credits or anything, but he didn't really make it past being a kid actor, unfortunately. I thought he was a pretty good actor in the film. I thought, he played it great. Yeah, so he's with his mom, and they are not able to celebrate Halloween because they're religious views. And his friends from school see him, at trick or treat. 1963, if you don't do a treat, you get a trick. So they start egging his house, and he feels bad. You know what I'm saying? He's the outsider. He is the kid who can't be like everyone else, and especially all that time. Now, all that time, you had most people forget. At least younger people don't know about like the. Of that era where it was very a lot of restrictiveness, not from her, I mean just in the society as general, right? There was a very normalization, 2.5 kids, nuclear family, blah 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 blah, right? So there's that, right? And if you weren't part of the norm, which is the only other time in history, by the way, when they've used the word norm other than today, or normal, because truthfully, there is no normal, but I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, in that time, so you have, it's very narrowing thinking. And so this also plays into the social dynamics, right? Just how we treat, men versus women, or vice versa, or, different colors, whatever. You've got this. There's a structure that was put in place for people to live by, with their set of boundaries and borders of what was a person. With that, the idea of like a criminal or the outsider or the rebel, or there's a mixed bag of feelings with that. You could be either like, seen as like the hero or the anti-hero, I should say, or just the rebel without a clue or whatever. So with that, I think that's how I see this character. That's how I see Butch, as like, and you find out later in the film, like, where he really comes from. You find out, like, everything ties together, right? You find out how Clint Eastwood ties in with Kevin Costner, and you get to see the similar story between Kevin Costner and Philip, the kid. And the parallels are is part of the movie. That's what makes the movie good. It's the you see this cycle of never-ending cycle of violence and domination and how we treat people, and it just carries on from one generation and passes down to the next. That I think is the biggest takeaway of this film. So I keep getting distracted. In the film, so he escapes from, they both escape from prison, both of them, and they go to this neighborhood suburban area, which is where Philip and his mom lives. It's early in the morning, and Kevin Costner is out in the street looking for a different car to steal, while his partner is actually, he just kind of wanders off, and then he sees Philip's mom, who's by herself, cooking breakfast in the window. He decides to go in after her, and then in the process of doing so, basically just attacks her and starts moving on her and shit. Well, Philip walks in, and let me, before I say that, before he walks in, he asks the mom, he's like, "Do you have a man in the house?" Like, he's the dude. He's that kind of asshole dude. Fucking, he reminds me of the dude from Green Mile, not Green, from Shawshank, the one that got beat up, and he's all crawling away. Him, he reminds me of that dude. That's who he reminds me of. That guy. And there's a lot of that. There's like this, he's playing the over-typical, maniacal, like, just, career criminal asshole. I'm not doing it justice. There's a name for it. One second. And so he's basically about to rape his mom, and then he comes in. He's like, "Oh, you do got a man in the house, right?" Well, then out of nowhere, Kevin Costner comes in, busts him, and then punches him to the ground, and then takes over the situation. He then goes to, in the process, the gun is knocked out of his hand, tossed to the ground. Philip picks it up, and then he actually tells him, Kevin Costner says, he's like, "Pick it up," and then pointed at me, and "Come here. Now I want you to say, stick him up." And he does it. The kid, he's like 8 years old. He doesn't know any better, right? He's just a sheltered kid. And so he's like, "Stick him up." He's like, "Perfect." Then, at the same time, through the same window, the neighbor is like an old dude, sees what's been going on, and then he comes over with a shotgun. Well, this then escalates to where Kevin Costner grabs the kid, Terry grabs the mom in a standoff situation, and then the neighbor's got a shotgun, and they're all indoors, like in the kitchen, where basically if the old dude fires, then he's not only going to hit Kevin Costner, he's also going to hit the kid, and he points that out to him, right? Kevin Costner points that out. He says, "You don't want to do that. You hit the kid." In the story, you see that Kevin Costner's the one that actually makes the choice to say, "Let's take the kid," because everyone at this point in the neighborhood's waking up. They're making a lot of noise. you know, and then she freaks out, obviously taking the kid, and then Terry, being the moron that he is, starts yelling out to the whole neighborhood, and then draws attention, and then starts shooting in the air. Again, he's an idiot, right? He's the animal, basically. He's very animalistic, very like that. Just not thinking things through. And so then they take off, and with the kid. Now, she's freaking out and calling the police and doing what a mother does. Obviously, she should. So then it cuts to them just on a joyride. This is the start of the story, right? This is the movie. They find a toll, not a toll, but a payphone. You know, again, 1963. But so Terry makes a call to his cousin, trying to find a place to hide out low. Terry takes the keys from the car just in case, and then Philip asks him, he's like, "Why do you take the keys?" And Kevin Costner's like, "So I don't leave them." Would you leave them? Oh yeah. And it's the best line because he's so charismatic in this film. You don't want to like him, but you do like him, right? Because he's just, you see how, again, I keep repeating myself, but you see how someone can end up this way. From there is they just go on a joyride, and to the kid, he thinks it's he's 8 years old. He thinks it's like a joyride. It's an adventure, right? He's never had this type of experience being from the household that he's from. So this is all new to him. This is an adventure, And then the story turns into that when you see the scenes between the kid, basically any scene with the kid, it's the adventure, right? Anything outside of that is the real world catching up. That's when they cut to Clint Eastwood, who plays Sheriff Red Garrett, I believe. Let me pull that back up here. I think I said it earlier. Yeah, Garnet. Red Garnet. And him and his partner, and they actually meet Laura Dern, who was called in from the governor's office, and she plays a criminologist to team up with Clint Eastwood to go on the manhunt. So she is basically, and then during that time she's got to basically prove her worth amongst all the boys, and she obviously does that because it's a great character. And even then, Clint Eastwood sees it by the end and all that. Actually sees it much sooner than that. But, in fact, because Clint Eastwood is he's the football coach that's been there a long time. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows him. He's the guy who's like, who's leader of the bowling team. That type of guy. You know what I mean? There's a lot of it. And I point that out because each male character in the film is a personality type. You've got Red, who is basically alpha dog, of that group, and he's got his assistants. You've got Bradley Whitford, who's basically playing the wild card. You don't really know what to make of him throughout the film because he's very quiet until the end. But even then, he doesn't play a good guy because he starts hitting on Laura Dern later. So you get to see these different characters and these different personalities of the different avenues of men. Basically, they have to get supplies, right? They've got a couple bucks from the dudes that they kidnapped the car from prison. You don't see what happened to him yet. They go to a local general store, and Kevin Costner has to go in to get supplies. Meanwhile, he hands the gun to Philip to watch Terry in the back seat. And there's a funny scene just before that where he says, Terry's trying to basically put his dominance up. He's like, saying something about, I'm gonna kill you, man. Or, is that a threat? He's like, no, that's a fact. And he's like, Philip, hold the wheel. And then Philip grabs the wheel. He leads back with the gun. He's like, you know, in 2 seconds, I'm gonna break your nose. Boom! And he pops him right in the nose, right? That's a threat. And that's a fact. And then he just goes, it is the greatest line, dude. And just basically calls him out, right? He's like, no, you're not taking this place. I'm the dominant one in the car. This is my game. You're not doing anything, right? Then when they stop and the kids got to watch Terry, Kevin Costner's in the store grabbing supplies and cigarettes and booze and all this stuff, right? But he's a bad dude. You establish that he's a bad dude. Obviously, you know, in the story he's got to go. From there, that's when the shopkeeper starts to walk out with a baseball bat, and then Kevin Costner's being all smooth, and he's like, "You got a phone in there?" He's like, "No." "You better go lay down until we leave." You know, and then he asks, and this is the thing. He asks Philip, "You coming or not?" And he waits a second, and then it's up to Philip, and he decides to go with him. Now, you would say maybe it's because he's a kid and he doesn't really know any better. Maybe it's his only way out, you know what I'm saying? Or he just didn't know. Maybe he just thought it was a sense of an adventure. I don't know. But he goes with him. And then, so from there, they're on this joyride. That's when and then it goes into this great scene, and I put this in one of my previews in the previous videos of the previews I was going to do accompanying movies, and there was an audio clip that I did, basically talking about the car being the time machine. Where if you wanted to speed up into the future, you just hit the gas and you're going faster into the future, right? Or if you want to slow down time, you hit the brake, and then the car just literally slows down. Now, and then he goes to the point where he just stops the car. He's like, "Look around, Philip. This is the present. You want to stay in this as much as possible." That really caught me, because I seen that later on when I was older, and I realized, what that really meant. I didn't really get it when I was a kid, but I got it when I got older. Just this taking control of life, and for lack of a better phrase, stopping and smelling the roses. You're just taking that control that I think is inherent within the idea of the role of men. Like your the manifest destiny type thing. So like, I think there's a play into that. I want to mention that. Yeah, and then from that point, Kevin Costner he tries to be like a father figure. They actually get to know where Philip starts talking about his, Kevin Costner asks, he's like, "Where's your dad? You seen your mom there, I didn't see your dad." And he's like, and he talks about how his dad left, and you could see the immediate reaction by Kevin Costner in the film, where he's thinking about his own dad, and like how, what I'm saying, and then he actually says to Philip, "Now me and you got a lot in common, Philip. We're both good-looking dudes, we both like RC Cola, and we both got dads who don't give a shit," or something like that, right? And so he's building this bond between the kids. Now, you could say there is a what's the phrase on that, where the kidnapped becomes they don't see themselves as kidnapped, but they see, what I'm saying, they feel bad for the for the kidnapper. It's not I think it might be Munchausen. I can't remember. There's a psychological term for it. I don't think it's that. I don't think so. I think I think that Philip sees him almost like, A, this is an adventure, B, this is a father figure he never had. Because Kevin Costner is that charismatic. Now, moving on. they do mention, actually, there's a point where after that scene, then they start cutting to Clint Eastwood and the gang. They start getting to on the hunt, on the chase, and they bring up a moment where the title of the film is actually brought up, right? One of the side characters says something about in a perfect world, we'd be able to get a break, and catch this guy. And then Laura Dern's like, in a perfect world, stuff like this wouldn't happen. Which really sums up a lot of the film. It's weird seeing a movie that actually has the title in the movie, because you don't really see that anymore. It's one of the tropes that it's like almost like a movie trope where the director's in the movie. It's one of those things. Or, I think there's other movies like that. But, there's, I also want to point out, as she says it, in, just the next scene over, it was interesting because the camera angle is, this lower shot looking up towards Laura Dern and Clint Eastwood, but it's behind Laura Dern, basically showing, having an ass shot of her. Don't get me wrong, she's very attractive. But it's just kind of ironic, I found out. I was watching this and they're talking about a better world and there's an ass shot. Yeah, it's the 90s. Let's see. Then, I also want to talk about, there's quite a bit of foreshadowing. They set this up, the writers set this movie up really well in that there's key moments where they talk about earlier in the film that do pay off later on in the film. Yeah, the moment where Terry asks Philip if you've ever held a gun before, that gets paid off in the film. One of the police officers radios in and asks, if they get the chance to take the shot against Butch, do they take it? And he flat out says, no, I want this to be under control. I don't want some, half-assed Sergeant York taking the shot, from a deer rifle. Foreshadowing. So Clint Eastwood is also kind of, you see this worn down guy. He's been in the field for a while, and you see him, he's an older character. When have you not seen Clint Eastwood old? Kidding. I love Clint Eastwood. But he plays this aged cop, right? He's just worried that his psyche is going to be permanently affected by one of these cases, and you see him just worrisome about being eaten up inside by the job. That then gets paid off as well. Very beginning of the film, there's a scene towards later in the film. It's a shot where Kevin Costner is lying in the grass. There's a bunch of money everywhere, and then there's a Halloween mask of Casper just sitting next to him. So I'm gonna put that. That's another thing that's picked. That's one of the first things that gets foreshadowed. While they're in the adventure, there is a lot of interactions with the innocent people. And those are the lighthearted parts, right? It's all these parts with the kid is very lighthearted because it's just the way of the nature. They go into the general store of Friendlies, and because when he kidnapped Philip, he was still in the morning, and he was still in his tidy whities and a shirt. He didn't have any pants on, right? So he's got to go to the general store, get the kid some pants. At the same time, that's when you find the Casper costume. Okay. Again, there's another moment where one of the locals, they hear on the radio or they hear on TV that he's on the run. Butch is on the run. Well, and he's got the kid hostage. So the owner of Friendlies is up in the perch as the manager, looking down, and then he realizes it's Kevin Costner, and Kevin Costner looks back at him with his glasses. He's like, don't do it. And he gets all nervous and shit. At the same time, he's flirting with the cashier. He's like, "You are the friendliest bunch of folks." He slides a couple bucks down between her shirt. He's Kevin Costner of the '90s and very charismatic. He can get away with that shit. So there's that. That's a funny scene. And then he starts walking away, and then like these cops, they're outside, and they spot the stolen car in like parked around side, and he starts walking back, and then so that becomes a serious scene. There's like this, it's just a great balance between like this this adventure mixed in with the real world. Like every time, like each scene is just slightly. It's the same area, but it's different stories, right? As he's walking to the car, it's a moment of reality where the police are almost on him, and then he gets in the car, and it's a little more lighthearted. And then he like runs into the police car from behind. He like pops it in reverse, and then slams the back of the car to get out of there. Meanwhile, Philip is in the store, stealing the Casper costume. Because he wanted it. And one thing I do want to mention. In the moment where one of the other cashiers actually helping him find a pair of pants, they were talking about Halloween, and she asked him, "What did you go as Halloween?" And then he says, "A bandit." Because that's and then you see that's how he sees it. He sees himself as he's playing cops and robbers, right? So he steals the Casper costume, and he has a choice. He has a choice, which they bring up later. And Kevin Costner's like, "It's up to you, Philip. You got a choice." Throughout the whole film, he gives them the choice to make the right choice, but he doesn't do that. And that's just interesting to me. Similar to it, there was other scenes where, so there's another scene where they have to find clothes for him. He wanted to change out his outfit from a prison uniform, and then there's like this open farm with like this old dude on a tractor in this field, and then Kevin Costner just casually walks up to the yard, and they've got a clothesline, just dried out clothes, like maybe your grandma used to have. And my grandma did. She still does, in fact, actually, air dry clothes in the summertime, which is amazing because you get that nice fresh smell. But yeah, he starts, getting clothes, and then he swaps car. He steals the other car. It's the one you actually see here in the thing. That's the yellow car that he steals. Well, from there, that's after that. That's right, the friendlies was after that farm scene. But it's all part of the same thing. It's every time you see like these little adventures where they meet like the local folk, right? That's when it starts off light and